y'all see me in this van. But I want to thank you all for taking your time out, the special guest and you, Maya Pittman, for taking your time to do this event during this time. I feel like it's very important to, touch upon mental health because that can be very detrimental to a lot of people and very unhealthy physically and emotionally. And I'm just excited. I enjoyed you speaking last time for Queening You, and that's why I wanted to invite you again. But thank you so much again, you guys, and I can't wait to hear all you have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I want to invite, I know it has historically been just me, but we have a host of beautiful Black queens counselors in the counseling center now. So I'll have them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, good evening, ladies. I'm Phylicia Bridgers, and I'm a counselor here in the Counseling Center at ECU. It's a pleasure to work alongside with Tempest and Maya and to just serve our community as a whole, but of course, our African American women. So I'm just glad to be with you all, even though it's virtually. Hopefully, in the near future, I'll be able to meet some of you all face to face. So I'm excited about us having a great time tonight, talking about our beautiful minds.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tempest Anderson, and I'm also a staff counselor here. And I'm really, really excited to be here tonight to serve alongside with my coworkers. But this is one of my favorite things to do, favorite things to talk about amongst Black women. And so I'm super stoked for tonight and excited to jump in. Happy to meet each of you maybe one day after the pandemic, but definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us in the meantime, in between time.
All right, thank you so much. And the last thing that I'll impart is I know that we get these requests from individual organizations and we love serving you, but we also want to encourage you to recognize that as Black women, you are the fastest and the largest growing educated group of population here on campus and in our nation right now. And so I encourage you to continue to address things where you see fit with a state of unity, collaboration, and bringing that power together. And so we're going to jump right in. I have a PowerPoint here that I'm going to share with you all. And again, just starting off, we thought that it would be very important to talk about the mind-body connection, because again, we're at a time right now where there's a lot of different changes, and we want to emphasize the idea that we can assess our mental health from our body as well. And so as we consider where we lie on the spectrum of mental health, it's important to not only take note of how you feel, but take note of how you feel physically and recognize that these two things are joined together. So as we move on here, we have a wealth of wonderful counselors in the counseling center, but I did want to highlight the counselors of color that we have. First is Darren Hughes, who's been there for a while. He's the assistant director, and he has worked in the counseling center for decades at this point, and he's done a wonderful job. He's a resource to you. Of course, Tempest, Phylicia, and myself. I'm also operating as the outreach coordinator and coordinator of intercultural services, so connecting intercultural activities through Ladonia Wright Cultural Center with students as well, and recognizing that this is considered an underserved population, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We've got Ms. Teresa Vaughn, who is our newest staff counselor, and then Michael Harris, who's a staff counselor, and he's also the coordinator of the collegiate recovery community. And so that's for students who maybe have found themselves facing some sort of addiction and they are now entering recovery. And so I know that's something in the Black community, especially in minority community, that we don't talk about a lot, but it is a mental health concern. So consider those that you know and those that may be in need of recovery, referring them to that part of our center. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the mind-body connection, what that is. And then we're going to consider what's going on in the world. So again, we're still living in a pandemic, elections are coming up, and we want to talk and consider what those things are that may be impacting our mental health. Then we'll move on down to coping and chaos. And this is going to be different ways to consider dealing with our mental health, coping during this time, and then being your own balance. So we're going to talk about a superpower that we all have, which is mindfulness. And we're going to explore different ways to get in tune with that. And then again, we'll end with a question and answer period. So as you are going through this presentation, questions come up for you, we highly encourage you to drop some of those questions in the question box so that we can address those as we fit towards that question and answer period. Okay. So moving right along. First, let's talk about what mental health is, right? In short, and I know this says emotional twice, but it's our mental, emotional, psychological, and emotional well-being. So in other words, if you think about how you feel, you think about how you're operating mentally on a psychological component, and all of that turns into our overall well-being and how we're operating on a health level. One of the things I encourage people to think about is the last time you entered a stressor or a very stressful event. And I would encourage all of you to consider, how did I handle that? How did I respond to that event? And 9 times out of 10, that is what's going to tell you where you are on the mental health spectrum. So did you respond in a way where you were agitated? I'm sorry, I think my thing went away here. Give me 1 second. Did you respond in a way where maybe you were agitated and you didn't know how to handle it? Did you panic? What was your response to that? And it'll give you a lot of information about your mental health. The next thing is it's developmental. So one of the things we'll ask you in the counseling center when you come in is, of course, we deal with undergraduates, graduate students, and depending where you are on your developmental phase, it'll impact your emotional and mental health. So there's a unique experience, for example, that college students have, and that may be very different than when you graduate and enter a different developmental phase. The other thing is thinking about thinking, acting, and feeling. So although we talk about emotional and psychological well-being, it's also a lot of times found in our behavior, right? Or found in how we make decisions and process that cognitively. So that's something to consider. And then when we think about the contributing factors, it's biological. One of the things I implore and encourage students to do, especially in their downtime, is go home and do some research. Right? Ask your family members, hey, what were you dealing with when you were my age? What kind of maybe potential mental health concerns did you run into? And that can give you a lot of information about how you may be running into those same issues. Life experiences, so especially right now, COVID-19, I mean, this is an unprecedented time. We've never been in a position where we've had to completely switch over to a virtual platform like this, and we have to consider how that impacts us. And then, of course, we mentioned family history, but that also relates on a genetic standpoint. So when you consider the African American and minority population, we have had a unique set of experiences in this country, and that history also impacts our mental health. So one thing to note is that mental health and mental illness does not discriminate by your background or race, but access to care might. So what that means is, although anyone is susceptible to experiencing a mental disorder or mental illness, it doesn't mean that we have the same access. So for example, I'm so excited that we have more counselors of color in the counseling center, because with that limited number before, it may have been very difficult for students of color to consider going to counseling. Thus, they didn't have the same access to care. So we want to think about those things that may stand in the way of that, okay? So moving on, what's the mind-body connection? Well, this is the concept that our mind, so our thoughts and emotions, can all play a central role in aspects of our physical health as well, right? So let's think about that, right? When we are off mentally, quote off, or we're not feeling like ourselves, we may also be experiencing some physical changes. We may find ourselves becoming irritable, more tired than usual. We may experience physical pain even. When I was in private practice, a lot of the referrals came from people who actually went to their primary care doctor and said, you know what, I've been having chronic headaches for months and I have no idea what that means. And in actuality, it was really some form of stress or depression or some sort of mental illness. So as we look at some of those signs and symptoms in a bit here, I encourage you to consider, what are the various aspects of my physical health that I've noticed have been consistent or persistent, and could it actually be a mental problem or issue, right? To add to that, there is a constant invisible communication that occurs between our mind and our body. It's inescapable. The body doesn't move unless the mind tells it to. And so we have to consider taking care of both of those things at the same time. And on a biological perspective, the brain literally translates our thoughts and feelings into electrical and chemical impulses that get sent directly through the body. And this causes a biochemical reaction. So how can I simplify that? Think about what happens if you get really nervous or you get anxious about having to present in front of the class, your body goes into a reaction, right? You may start sweating, your heart may start beating fast. And this is just an example of that connection. And our body's response to what's going on in our head is comparative to the strength of our thoughts and emotions. This is why we talk about things like positive self-talk and affirmations, because that goes right back into the body and impacts how we move. And I put it here where Buddha said it best: we literally become what we think. So that's something to consider. What are the different thoughts and what are the different messages that you've received on a daily, on the regular, and how can that possibly be impacting your mental health as well? Okay. So we're going to take a pause for a minute before I pass this along. And I want you to think about what is going on right now in the world. There's so much happening, right? So much going on in our world. And if you could kind of drop those in the comment box, we can kind of begin compiling different ideas about what could possibly be contributing to our mental health as it stands today, right? So I'll take a pause for you all to think about that for a moment. What is going on in the world that could be potentially having a major impact right now on our mental health?
I would say elections.
Yes, elections, absolutely. That's a huge one, right? Especially now in the digital age where we can't escape the information of elections.
Police brutality and killing African-American men and stuff.
Absolutely. All of those things and our exposure to them.
Yep.
Definitely. Lack of social interaction, Black Lives Matter movement, COVID, SARS in Nigeria, all of these things are impacting how we feel. And that's why one of the things that we'll talk about here soon is self-care and how do I monitor and manage my exposure to these things, right? So with that said, I want you to continue considering that as we move through this program. I'm going to pass it off for the moment to Phylicia, and we'll get into how what's going on is having a major impact on us and how that's pertinent to our current mental health.
Well, first, I want to commend you all for showing up tonight. You're not here because of an assignment or for extra credit or anything, but you're here for your own self. So we commend you and say hats off to you ladies for showing up on this evening. And two, this particular section is very important because everyone doesn't identify with the same issues. Certain events may be more pressing than others or more important than others. So it's good that you all have taken a moment to just really tap in and reflect on what's going on in the world and what do you personally identify with as far as it's having the most impact on your life and your mental health. Tonight we want to recognize how culture is so intertwined with our mental health and our wellness. So it's just not, oh, it's something I watch on television, something that I talk about amongst my friends, sisters, but I'm actually taking in and internalizing the things that are taking place around us socially. So what's going on? Race-based trauma. I'm sure you ladies have heard this term a little bit more frequent in 2020 than you may have in the past. So race-based trauma is a natural byproduct of the experiences that minorities must deal with on a regular basis. Race-based trauma may result from racial harassment, witnessing racial violence, or experiencing institutional racism. And now we live in an environment where we are exposed to these events, whether we like it or not. All you have to do is turn on the television, turn on your cell phone, open up an app. Whether you wanted to see some type of act of violence or not, it could easily pop up in your notifications without an invitation. And that is something that we have been privy to based upon how much access we do have to the things that are taking place all over the world. So let's take a look at this same natural byproduct a natural byproduct. What we mean is usual or it's an expected side effect or secondary result of something. Okay? Many are beginning to believe that is pathological, meaning that it can be assessed for and being worked through with the professional assistance, meaning that you can now begin to process these thoughts or experiences connected to race-based trauma. So I'm so glad that we are now in a safe environment amongst other beautiful African American women where we can actually process what race-based trauma is. Can you imagine what our mothers or grandmothers or great grandmothers, they didn't even have the opportunities to be in these type of environments, and how privileged we are here in 2020 to be in a safe place to be able to process what is going on and not be judged, but actually commended for the work that we're trying to do to heal from the race-based drama that probably has taken place from generation to generation, and hopefully not pass it on to the next generation. Okay, so what is going on? Critical race theory in education. This is where you ladies are now with being in academia. What grit researchers do not adequately examine is the role that race plays in producing anxiety, trauma, and general unpleasantness in students of color, engaging in high pressure academic work, the psychological and emotional energy required to manage stress in academic and social contexts, as well as systematic and everyday racism, can be overwhelming and taxing. Basically, in a nutshell, what that is saying is, in order to understand being a Black woman at a predominantly white institution, you have to be a Black woman at a predominantly white institution. In so many words, that's what that is saying. And that is something that, even if you all are from two different organizations on tonight, that is something that you all have in common. You are Black, beautiful women receiving an education at a predominantly white institution. Although your experiences might not exactly be the same, they do have a common thread. There is a psychological response to being Black in a majority white environment. Now, the key is, have you become so used to going on from day to day that it's just a part of your life? The struggle is a part of your life. You're used to having to work harder than the next person. Those are the things that we hopefully on tonight you will be able to take notice of and see if that has become a part of the makeup of who you have become as a woman at a predominantly white institution, and is that healthy for you?
And if I could briefly chime in here, Phylicia, someone earlier in the chat said lack of social interaction, right? And I want to encourage you all to consider that this is something that you all have been doing long before you knew that you were doing it. So as Phylicia was really capping critical race theory and what that means, note that you all, what does it mean, or what are the mental health implications for being the only person who understands what I'm going through? Right? And yet you still rise to the demand of what everyone else is also striving for and beyond. So again, know that this is not normal. This is, you know, we're not mythical, but we absolutely do some very phenomenal and abnormal things in our quest to success, which means we have to be way more aware of our mental health in that endeavor. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Absolutely. And I believe with that comes the opportunity to help us hold each other accountable as women, to do a check-in and see how we are coping and if we are thriving in the midst of, quote unquote, the lack of social interaction. I feel like we are so powerful as African American women, and sometimes I don't believe we recognize our strength in the numbers that we have. And we really do not have to be islands by ourselves. Okay, okay, what does this mean for, okay, what does this mean for the mental health in minorities? Let's just take a moment, if we do have time, to kind of check in with our audience and see how can the things that I just covered, how do you even feel like it identifies or connects with your mental health as a Black woman at a predominantly white institution? Do you all ever feel as though you're having to work harder than the other person, the next person? Do you feel like you're thriving in this particular environment?
If I can speak, I know for me, when I was a freshman, having to adjust because my high school was predominantly Black, so I had to get used to being around people that didn't look like me and having to kind of prove myself to my peer mates or my classmates. But yeah, that was for me.
Okay. Jasmine said, I surround myself with people who look like me. Like being in a sorority has helped me not feel alone. That is a great point. And I will disclose something, that working with a lot of my clients that are women of color, there are a lot of women that feel isolated on this campus as well, and they are introverts. They are not brave enough to get involved with any type of organization. They don't even have the skills, the communication skills that they need. And so take that in mind, even while you're around campus or now looking virtually. If you see a sister that's kind of out there by herself, don't take it as that she doesn't feel like she doesn't fit in, or she's uppity or snobbish or anything like that. She may not have the skills that she needs to reach out and ask for assistance or to be a part of another community.
Absolutely. And Phylicia, I think that highlights that, one of the most unique things about Black people, minority women, minority people, is that we're not monolithic. And so we're coming from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of places, experiences. And so we can be empathetic, especially in imploring you all as campus leaders to consider, wow, what does that feel like to maybe be looking the same as someone, but feel completely different? And how we can connect just on the fabric of our shared race, which leads to a lot of our shared experiences.
Yes. All right. Female and mental health. So as you can see, women are 2 times more likely to attempt suicide than men. And I would really like to encourage you guys to take a couple of notes, because this is very important. Anorexia and bulimia are 3 times more common in women than men. We are more likely, 2 times more likely to develop depression, 2 times more likely as men that suffer anxiety disorders, 2 times more likely than men to have post-traumatic stress disorder. So can you imagine how the stats may possibly increase or double with being women of color? And that is something that, yes, our beautiful skin makes us powerful, unique, and set apart. But with that beautiful skin also comes some trials and tribulations and some ups and some downs. And we may be more keen to not handle those depression or anxiety in the best way that we possibly can. So hopefully tonight, this will encourage you all to just tune in a little bit more to taking care of your mental health, because as you can see, the stats prove just being a woman alone, mental illness can affect us much more severely than it can a man. Tempest or Maya, you have anything to add to that slide?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna jump here in a second in the next slide. And bringing the 2 things together. We've been talking about being a woman of color, and it's going to be interesting. Maybe it's in a couple of slides to go, but let's talk a little bit more about what this means to be a woman and having to carry this whole thing of mental health. And so it talks about, here are some key points here. Women are at higher risk of poverty, and women who need education can't afford it. Women are more likely to be victims of domestic violence. Women are underrepresented in politics. and women rape victims are all still seeking justice. And so the question is, what's going on? You know, why is it that women have these really, really heavy burdens to carry, if you will? That's the first word that kind of comes to mind. I'm wondering if you all feel that weight and feel that pressure at being added to your overall wellness and mental health. Anyone? Well, I don't think we're alone in it at all. That might have been overwhelming in and of itself to realize those things of the burdens that women have.
You know what, Tempest, I'll plug me here. This is meant to be jarring. And this is meant to be jarring because we are at a point in our lives where we can't unsee these things. Ladies, we're looking at it right in the face. You know, we're looking at the first Black vice president who's, you know, front and center. We're looking at, you know, the continued issues that are happening in higher ed. You know, I can speak for myself, but I'm sure I can speak for Phylicia and Tempest when we say we sit right in front of students who are, you know, facing major issues when they even talk about their academic life and how to correspond with professors. And so we want this to be shocking because we want you to know that we still have work to do with decreasing the stigma for us and feeling like, well, you know, as a woman, we just kind of got to take it on the chin and keep it moving, right? If anything, this should really highlight for you all why we have to be unapologetic at this point when it comes to our mental health. And so I know that, you know, it felt silent, but that's a good thing because I hope that means you're reflecting and that you're shocked by some of this information.
Right. Thank you for that, Maya. And I think, like I said, it's an interesting thing here. One of the things that I was mentioning earlier was kind of combining the two things that we've been talking about, being Black, but also being woman. That presents an interesting intersection of being a double minority. And so it says here, recently, this work has been extended to examine the double minority effect, if you will, which is defined as a psychological state created when two devalued identities interact to influence the individual in a way that is higher than the sum of the independent effects of those identities. And so we have this interesting effect that we are woman, but we are also Black at the same time, being a person of color. And so that presents some real intense and specific things that I think that we can only understand and deal with. Some of these things that we've talked about of being on a predominantly white campus and encountering different things as well. I know within the news itself, it's been this whole thing of protecting our Black women. And I'm pretty sure everybody's kind of hip to game on just all the things that have been going on in the news, whether it be like the Meg Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez issue as well, of maybe feeling as though she's completely in a vulnerable space and in an unprotected space. And so I think the call is a timely one, an overdue one, to say that, you know, we should protect our Black women, but we also have to protect ourselves in the sense of our own mental space, the things that we have within our control. There are things that may deem and feel really out of our control, but we have a lot within our power and within our control as well to be able to be well.
Tempest, I mean, when you start talking about that, I'm not getting excited. You start talking about that social media and everybody is protect the Black woman, but I'm ready to start seeing the action behind it. And hopefully tonight, the conversation will provoke you to let's just not put that onto Black men to protect the Black woman, but we as Black women protect the Black woman. But I'm gonna leave it at that. But you hit me with that, sister.
Yes. It's like a power to the people moment. So what's going on? Depression. This may seem common, but it is a serious mental health illness. And speaking to clients, especially when I'm speaking to Black women, I describe it as, if you think of the actual breakdown of the word of being depressed, like what is it? What's this feeling that's weighing upon you, that you're almost feeling as though something is like smushing you in a sense and really bringing you down. And so it says depression is a mood that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depression or major depressive disorder or clinical depression. It affects how you feel, think, and behave. And it can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems, which Maya was kind of touching on earlier with the mind-body connection. You may also have trouble doing normal day-to-day activities like going to class or doing your homework or getting up with friends, even if you are in one of these lovely groups that you're a part of, and that may be fun and exciting, but at the same time, you may not have the energy for it or the motivation to get in contact with something that you are really excited to be a part of. That's kind of like a key kind of thing to check in on, a key symptom to say, something isn't going well here. I need to check in with that. And depression also makes you feel as if life isn't worth living. And so kind of dipping into some of the suicidal thoughts as well too. And some people, when they think of suicide, they're thinking of like, oh, does this just mean ending my life? But it can mean come up in various ways. Like, I wonder what it'd be like if I wasn't here. I wonder what it'd be like if I didn't have these obligations. And so I think or I wonder what it would be like if life wasn't worth living. And so kind of dipping into those things. Depression is a big thing that's going on. So here's some stats for depression. 30% of college students reported feeling so depressed that it was difficult to function. So some of those things I mentioned before, young people diagnosed with depression are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than adults. That's a wow stat. And I think something to kind of really pay attention to there. You all fall in the young people realm of what we're talking about here, not just teenagers or high schoolers or middle schoolers, but right where you are in this stage of life. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among college students. 19% of young people in the United States either contemplate or attempt suicide every year. And 4 out of 5 college students who either contemplate or attempt suicide show clear warning signs. And so what are some of those warning signs? As I talked about before, lack of motivation, feeling isolated, not feeling like you can get out of bed, frequently crying, saying things like, I wonder if life is worth living. I wonder what it'd be like if I wasn't here. I wonder if anybody really cares about me. Those are some warning signs that you can kind of tune into. Do you all have anything, Maya or Phylicia?
Yeah, I want to challenge people to, a word that comes up when we talk about these things for me is honesty, and how it takes a lot of courage to be honest with ourselves, and it takes even greater courage to be honest with others. And so I would challenge you all when you call each other or you run into one another and you ask, oh, how you're doing? And how we, especially as women of color, we have a propensity to always say, oh, I'm fine. How about you? What my challenge to you is to ask again, how are you? Allow them to answer, and then ask, how are you really? And I think that'll allow us the necessary space it takes to tune in with ourselves briefly, but honestly, so that we can be efficiently checking in with others while not taking on the full responsibility of others' mental health, but knowing that we can take care of one another in that way. And we will want the same for ourselves as well.
Right. So here is coping in the chaos. We've talked about some things some pretty heavy lifting, but here's some things to tune into as well as you're having those things in mind that we've talked about. Is your body telling you something? And so these are the things that we want you all to pay attention to, and pay attention to the the sisters beside you as well. Maybe you're noticing things, and these are some talking points or some questions you can then ask. And so these could be some of the following signs that can tune into your emotional health and to see if it's out of balance. And so if you're having trouble sleeping, insomnia, maybe you have difficulty going to sleep at night or difficulty staying asleep at night. I've talked to several college students who say that they can't even sleep, that sometimes they're up for days. And we're not talking like taking anything to stay up, but more so like they don't feel like they can rest. The thoughts are constantly going on, just going on in their head. Lightheadedness, palpitations, and so feeling like your heart is racing, sexual problems, shortness of breath, stiff neck, sweating, upset stomach, weight gain or loss, back pain, change in appetite, chest pain, constipation or diarrhea, dry mouth, extreme tiredness, general aches and pains, headaches, or high blood pressure. These are some things to tune into. Your body is signaling something. It's setting off some alarms to say, hey, pay attention here. One of the books that I have near me is by, I can't even reach it, it's The Body Keeps Score, and it's by Bessel van der Kolk. I don't know if anyone's read it on here, but it's a great book that kind of talks about some of these things, how our body holds on to certain things that affects our overall well-being and especially our minds. So how the body affects the mind. So here are some cognitive symptoms: memory problems, inability to concentrate, poor judgment, seeing only the negative, anxious or racing thoughts, constant worrying. Some emotional symptoms that you may see is moodiness or irritability, short temper. It's just not like that angry Black woman stuff that, we hear about. But it's a true emotion that's coming up for you. Just feeling agitated, or having the inability to relax, feeling overwhelmed, a sense of loneliness and isolation, depression or unhappiness. Some physical symptoms, we kind of went over those in the last slide, but just to refresh your memory, just in case, to further empower you with this information: aches and pains, upset stomach, nausea, dizziness, chest pain, rapid heartbeat, loss of sex drive, frequent colds. I think that's a cool one to point out, not in cool like, oh, it's cool to get frequent colds, but just something to tune into. I think sometimes we'll be like, oh, I'm just like, I keep getting sick. These days it's like, do I have it? Is it me? Like, do I have it, Lord? In reference to COVID. But, you find yourself like frequently getting sick, and it could be a certain time of the year too. And that dips into like a little bit of the seasonal depression piece. But it's like, I'm constantly like keeping a cold or something. This could be a physical symptom that something is going on here that we need to tune into. And then behavioral symptoms: eating more or less, sleeping too much or sleeping too little. Thank you. My daughter is over here, y'all. So if you hear any crackling of paper or any rustling of feet, she's working hard. She's doing her own presentation. Isolating yourself from others, procrastinating or neglecting responsibilities, using alcohol or cigarettes or drugs to relax. And then nervous habits. So like nail biting, pacing, even pulling at your hair could be a behavioral symptom to pay attention to.
And I'll pick up here as well, Tempest. Again, we have already determined that Black women, women of color, we have had to rise to an occasion, right? And so the reason why these behavioral, these cognitive, physical symptoms are so important is because we're not always aware that something's going on until we're in the hospital, right? Or we're sick, or, we can't go to class anymore. And so whereas that may be more apparent in other populations, Black women have to be willing to step outside of their mind and look at other things to assess where we are from a mental health perspective. And I know earlier on here, we've got loss of sex drive and sexual relationships. And so I want to highlight relationships as well. These romantic relationships that we're in, we should be assessing how we're being made to feel in those, because that definitely has an impact on our mental health as well. And so again, I encourage you all to consider what else can I look for to help me be in better assessment of my mental health, right? And the body and relationships is one of them, especially now in COVID when we're not interacting. The connections with others have decreased while the time and connections with ourselves has had to increase. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And so I want to get more into coping and some of the steps to self-care. This says after an emotional or psychological trauma, but if you consider what COVID-19 is right now, this can be considered a trauma, something that has shaken the core, a stimulus that has interrupted our normal thinking. And so we've got 5 things here that we can consider. First, mindful isolation. So this is a disconnect from triggering interactions or other situations that might elicit a fight, flight, or freeze response. Social media, to put it frankly, right? This is a great area where you can say, you know what, let me put a timer on my social media, or let me pick a couple of days where I'm not engaged at all, if I know this is going to be triggering for me, right? So consider how I can mindfully or in a very present way isolate myself from things that may be impacting my mental health and I don't even know it. That also is a great way to address chronic depression or sadness that can begin to build up. And then we move on to the right with community, just what we're doing right now. We got 46 women here together sharing this information, which is awesome. And so when you think about self-doubt, right, another concept that Black women and people experience, especially imposter syndrome. So feeling like you don't belong, like this space isn't yours. Connecting with people who you identify with as your empathetic and open support system is a great way to combat that through community and processing your feelings with them. So that's why Alicia and Brittany, again, thank you so much for having this, because this would be considered the processing of feelings, right? So we move on to the left, discharging energy, anger, right? We talked about what's going on, social injustice, these things that we keep seeing about Black women, right? Tory Lanez and all of this other, however, whatever your opinion is, can build a resentment and an anger in us. And of course, we have to find ways to discharge that energy. So again, that mind-body connection, what am I doing for my physical health? Am I taking a walk? Am I really looking at this as imperative for my mental health to take a brisk walk or run, finding a safe way to discharge intense anger? That includes creative expression as well, writing, painting, being creative in that way. And then with anxiety, so that increased worry and trauma, feed yourself well, get good rest and avoid toxins, your overall well-being in the form of self-care. And then of course, ask for help. We are resources, the counseling center, but if you visit our website, ecu.edu/counseling center, there's also a lot of other different ways to cope and find support. We have a long list of resources and apps that you can download right on your phone to help address those things. So consider that there is power and there are things that you can be doing to take care of yourself. And one of the things that I think is so important is mindfulness. I love it. I think it is something that we need to get more with, especially as Black women. And in short, I know that this has been a phrase thrown around everywhere, but it's the mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment. And in being in that present moment, we're able to calmly acknowledge what's going on. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Right? Again, we mentioned earlier that we as Black women and minority women have been conditioned to just deal, which means we bypass certain emotions that we should be dealing with and processing. And mindfulness allows us to do that. Again, I just wanted to highlight the mindfulness piece because this is a superpower that each of us have within us. It doesn't cost a thing. You can engage in mindfulness for 60 seconds to 10 minutes, however short or however long. So again, I encourage you to visit our website, look in the outreach self-help section, and there is a laundry list of mindfulness apps that you all can look at and look for. Okay, and thank you. We've dropped those Phylicia has dropped those in the comment section. So the mind and body are not separate. What affects one affects the other, okay? And so we no longer have time to say that we don't have time for that, okay? Again, a brief walk around the block and back can be enough to start the habit of addressing your physical health, right? And of course, that self-help. So the counseling center, we're still operating remotely. We're 8 to 5. the ECU.edu/counseling center, you can get information about how to sign up for an appointment, which is through our phone, 252-328-6661, which is still operating. And we continue to provide counseling services through video or through phone. And we are 24/7. So if something comes up after hours, you can still call our center. You'll be prompted to press 2 and you'll be connected to an on-call counselor. The other thing that I want to mention is we do have various groups and interactions that happen throughout the year. One of them is the healing space, which can also be found on our website and through our social media. I think we have our social media on here. Instagram, we are ECU CCSD, and you can find us on Facebook too. Just type in ECU Counseling Center, and you can see what events we have. On November 3rd, we're having a healing space, and this is for any student who may be experiencing some form of race-based trauma, like we mentioned earlier. The other thing that I really want to share with you all, let me see if I can switch over here. 1 second. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to share this. We Gather. We Gather is an intimate 3-part dialogue series created by a wonderful Black GA out of Wellness. Her name is Chanel Profs, and she has done a wonderful job in person. She switched it over virtually for women to gather, grow, and heal. And so I'm going to send this to Brittany and Alicia. So I encourage you all to fill out the Google form to register on October 20th from 6 to 7:30. That's going to be virtual as well. And she has done some amazing work. I don't know if any of you all have attended the one in person, but we had a great time. We've had one October 6th, and so we want to get those numbers up as well. And so now we're going to pause, and we're going to open up for any other additional questions, any information that we can clarify for you all as we wrap up here. All right, that must mean we have some thorough information going on here. But we have recorded this program, and so we hope to share that with you all. And just want to leave some final thoughts with you. So as I consider the importance of this and all of us coming together, again, I just want to highlight the fact that if anyone should be assessing the mental health of themselves and doing the work and recognizing what they need and checking in at all times, it's us. It's minority women or women of color, Black women, however you define yourself as being outside of the majority, know that there is an endless amount of resources that you don't not only have within you, but you have outside of you and through the university. And we're here to provide you that support. So I encourage you with that challenge again to ask your sister, how are you? Allow them to answer and then ask them again, okay, how are you really? I'll let Tempest and Phylicia leave their final thoughts as well.
I'd just like to say that I know that mental health can sometimes be a taboo topic amongst our community. And it's okay to face it head on. Mental health is not a bad thing. You take care of your natural health, you know, you go to hopefully your gynecologist and your dentist and etc. So it's good to check in to see how you're coping as far as being mentally well. So depression and anxiety may come as a topic that you don't want to talk about. Suicidal ideations may be something that you don't want to talk about. But we just happen to be a little bit different and we love to talk about it. So stop in and see us in the counseling center, and we will do our very best to support you or take advantage of the events that Maya highlighted previously. And it's amazing to be in this type of environment. And can you imagine being able to work with these type of women every single day? So hopefully that will encourage you to keep going on your educational journey to graduate, but make your mark on ECU's campus. That's my thing. I always say, no matter how big or how small, be sure to make your mark so you can make your sister's journey as easy as possible for her. It's been a pleasure with you ladies tonight.
Yes, with those sentiments, you know, I say Phylicia for president, the way she just wrapped that thing up, y'all. But yeah, I echo all of those sentiments, and it really has been a pleasure. I know that this information could feel overwhelming and jarring, some of the statistics that we discussed and talked about. But, you know, leaving with the bottom line is really, you know, lean into taking care of yourself. You are worth it. You matter. You're hearing it from us, even if you're not hearing it from anyone else. And so it's important to lean into that. We want you to be well holistically, well overall, mind, body, and soul. And so I definitely, like I said, echo the sentiments of coming to visit us, leaning into those events as well. I was able to attend the last virtual We Gather, and it was an amazing, enriching, and empowering experience. And so if you do have time, hop into one of those. I think you would definitely get full. Your tank will be full when you leave. So thank you all for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again.
Definitely. And Brittany and Alicia, we didn't know if you had any final words. You all also may be getting a post-event survey that will pop up. If you wouldn't mind submitting information so we can continue providing you with services as you all need them, that would be great as well. Alicia, Brittany, I'll leave you all with the final words. We appreciate you so much again for having us.
No, thanks.
I also want to say thank you for having this program. Oh.
No, you can go. It's fine.
Okay. That's all. I want to say thank you for having this program. It was really good and informational.
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well again. I got some new insight on a lot of things, and I was actually, it's kind of like a update when you get to talk about your mental health. So I've got a refresher of things that I need to pay attention to, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time again. And on the behalf of Queen of You, we all say thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, take care, ladies. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye-bye.